Welcome back to another Honest Review. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Brainscan, and here with me as always is Jesse Chavez.
Hello.
And this movie was brought on the show, a recommendation by Jesse, whereas I'd have actually never seen it before, even though it stars Edward Furlong of T2 fame, a bunch of other actors that probably nobody knows too much about. So this movie is 100% a callback to the era of the 90s when the future was still not set. Ironically, I'm saying that, but it wasn't...
No fate but what we make, I think.
Right.
I get. Yeah.
And in the 90s, a lot of technological movies were coming out, kind of predicting how technology would be in the next 20 years. Obviously, none of that shit really happened. It kind of did, like VR, and, we have cell phones in our pockets that are like mini computers. But overall, this is one of those movies that attempts to try and predict how that VR experience would go. And that's what Brainscan's about, essentially. But it's also a murder mystery movie. Mystery for the people in the movie, but not a mystery for our main character played by Edward Furlong. Chava, why'd you pick this movie?
Well, let's see. Outside of having Edward Furlong in it because of all the T2 jokes that we make, I just felt like for you, the soundtrack would have been right up your alley. Plus, just the general aesthetic and feel. I mean, they don't make movies like this anymore. It's a very solid snapshot of a very specific time in the 90s. I'd say there's a lot to it because in 1994, that was when the questions about video game violence and how far is too far was, being raised. We had massive hearings about, Mortal Kombat and Night Trap, and they were just like, people are using these games as, simulators for, rape and murder and assault, and they're leaving horrible impressions on our young children, and we need to save the children. And I think the movie's kind of an interesting rebuttal to all of that.
Lest we not forget, Doom was also a part of that conversation.
Yes.
So, we all read about these things. My dad played Mortal Kombat with me, and I knew the blood code. Everyone knew the blood code, but ABACABB. But I didn't turn into a psycho killer, and I have yet to rape anybody, thank God. So it turns out that once again, parents are not taking responsibility for their actions and how they raise their kids and trying to blame it on something else.
There's a great line in the movie where he's talking to the principal, and the principal's like, is it like going to see a pornographic film, getting an erection and raping someone with it? And he's like, oh, sir, erections don't rape people. People rape people.
Right, exactly. Another tie-in to what we're talking about, but to kind of set up the movie, what's his character's name again?
Michael Brower. He plays a high schooler named Michael, and as a child, he suffers a horrific trauma when he gets in a car accident that kills his mother, and it leaves him with like a scar on his knee. He walks with a limp. He's like not like super disfigured, but like disfigured enough to kind of make him a bit of an outcast. And he's a bit of a horror aficionado. He has the horror club at his high school, and he kind of gets in trouble with this principal because, they're watching these gory horror films. Gets temporarily banned on that, and he hears about this new game. When he goes home, he hears about this new game called Brainscan, which is supposed to be like the next thrilling horror video game. It puts you in the shoes of a serial killer. You get to actually reenact it and all that. And he's skeptical, but he figures why the fuck not and give it a shot. I should also add he's a total latchkey kid. His dad is always away on business, so he has this nice big house all to himself. He spends a lot of time just hanging out in his attic room with like this, at the time, state-of-the-art computer and entertainment system. It's got his own fridge and everything. It's kind of nuts. And he has a crush on the girl next door, and he like watches her from his window. And the game finally arrives. He gives it a shot, and it's a thrilling experience. He breaks into this strange man's house, and he stabs him to death and cuts off his foot. And like for him, it's all good fun until like later on the next day, he finds out that was one of his neighbors, and that murder apparently actually happened. And he starts to get freaked out. And the person he talked to on the phone when he ordered the game ends up like showing up, coming through his television screen, appearing in his room. The trickster, played by Ryder Smith, who I should add plays the role with Shakespearean gravitas. It's amazing. Like, anyone else could have come in and just been like, oh, I'll be kooky and crazy. I was like, no, he delivers everything just like with this wicked, mischievous fun to it. But at the same time, he's dead serious, like as a heart attack. He basically tells him like, yeah, no, the murders happened for real. And now that you're on the hook for this murder, you have to kill the witness. And he doesn't tell him who the witness is. Basically locked in where he has to just keep killing to try to cover up like the original murder. And he ends up killing his best friend because that was the witness, because he told his friend about the video game. He has to, the third one, it's not even supposed to be a murder. He's like, oh yeah, you just got to get rid of the evidence of, the fact that you killed your friend. So he tries to do that, ends up getting like a cop, his principal, another citizen. No, I think it's just a cop and the principal like killed in the process. And then he's like, yeah, well, now you have to kill again. And this time it's the girl you love. He doesn't want to do it, but he ends up like kind of like he's just so buried and entrenched in the game at this point. He has no choice. And of course, she wakes up before he can kill her, and she like tries to appeal to him and let him know like, no, like I have feelings for you. Because she like visits him throughout the movie, and she's trying to like appeal to him, and she's like, I watch you too. And she like pulls out all these photographs of like him. She watches him when he's not watching her, and like he manages to kind of regain control of himself and like assert like, no, the killing stops here. Gets in a big ol' fight with the trickster, and then a cop who's been like aggressively pursuing him throughout the movie like just shows up out of nowhere and shoots him to death. And he wakes up, and turns out whole movie was at the actual game itself.
Yeah, but there is an ambiguity to that in a post-credit scene.
Yes.
When the dog shows up with the foot in the front of his house. So it's fair to say that maybe the first murder was committed, but it's not totally sure by who, if it was him. Probably. But
well, I should add, so like when his horror club gets banned, his principal is essentially like, you need to bring in the next thing you want to show the club. I need to watch it and review it. So he brings him his copy of Brainscan to review. So for all we know, that could be him starting his own version of Brainscan by playing it.
It's true. It's very set up in one of those ways where like, was it real? Wasn't it real? But I think the things that I found most appealing about it was the fact that there's not like, because usually in the 90s when these technological things happen in these movies that don't know the future that we currently living in, they think that, most of the time it's like you have to put this headgear on, and like if anyone's seen Lawnmower Man, you're spinning around in fucking virtual reality, and he has some like silver crazy suit on, and all these things are hooked into you. It's very cyberpunky, really. And in terms of this game that he's playing in the movie, you don't need any of that. You just put it in, stare at the TV screen, and it kind of injects you into it. Very low grade technologically, which I appreciated, actually.
It's supposed to be, I think, hypnosis in the movie, but also it's a great from a production standpoint because it's one less prop to make. They just got to have flashing lights while Edward Furlong seizes in his big comfortable leather chair.
Right, and that's essentially the entrance into all of this. The thing and that's what brought me in. First off, was that the technology wasn't crazy. I'm so glad it wasn't. It was just simplistic and easy to get into. And then the second thing is that during the killings, Not only does it go into a first person view as if you were in a video game, like Doom or something, but the way it's handled with a black glove and a knife is what he uses in the first killing. And just the way that it's shot and he stabs the victim in the bed, it felt like a Giallo movie. Like it was like I was watching Deep Red or Suspiria or something. Fulci. I was just like so hooked immediately because of that, because I love Giallo movies, and they're essentially slashers for anyone who doesn't know, Italian slasher movies. But the ones that are mostly made famous are first person view, and the killer's always wearing gloves and always stabbing people. Like there's never anything crazy going on like Jason Voorhees style or Freddy Krueger with like an axe or an arrow or something. It's always just straight stabbing, black gloves. You never see who the killer is. And this movie literally feels like that in that first entrance to the killings.
Yeah, it's really weird because I feel like with the murders, they almost show less as the movie goes on. Like the first one's the most graphic. You don't even see when he kills his best friend. You do see when he kills the cops, and even then, it's not even by his own hand. It's because and like the main cop warns all the citizens about this, like, don't actually fucking bring real guns. We're just looking for suspects. And one of them, of course, sneaks a shotgun in and ends up gunning down a cop. And then the principal catches Michael while he's trying to sneak through a construction site, and like they kind of wrestle, and he accidentally knocks him back, and he ends up like collapsing a bunch of bricks on himself.
Yeah, he's essentially getting away by these mishaps.
Yeah, like it's realistically probably, it's highly improbable, just like a lot of coincidences, but given the fact that a majority of the movie turns out to be a game, it's like, well played. It all works. Just you want to keep them entrenched enough where it's like, yeah, you got to keep going on with these murders and stuff. You got to keep going, and it's always by the skin of his teeth,
And I also, because we kind of explained the movie, but it's the little idiosyncrasies of the movie that make it what it is. And what's so special about this too is that in technologically, because it's just that type of movie, it actually does predict something very well. Edward Furlong's character Michael always, when he's making a phone call, talks to this Igor character that's like, yes, master. Yeah. He's like, call my
Kyle.
friend Kyle, call Kimberly, call dad. And he's like, yes, master. And then he's like, later. And then it hangs up the phone call. This is all indicative, obviously, now we know, of like Alexia or Siri. Like, right now it could be like, Siri, hey, call grandma. It's the same exact thing. So in a way, they did kind of predict that correctly.
I think he's even better than Alexa, to be honest, because when Kimberly tries to call him towards the end, she accidentally pisses him off because she's a reporter for the school paper, and she gives like info to one of her bitchy friends who writes like a big article about him and like hurts his feelings. She tries to call him, and fucking Igor actually answers the phone, master's busy, and hangs back up. And I was just like, wow, I want that.
Like, I want an AI to be able to do that for me, like us, he's busy right now. There are little things like that I was like, wow, okay, they got that right. So I'll give kudos for the movie for that. But jumping over to the trickster, which is probably one of the best parts of the movie. And you're right, it is played by T. Ryder Smith, who doesn't look anything like the trickster in real life.
Yeah, it's a lot of prosthetics.
It is. And he looks so bizarre. There'll be a picture here for everyone. But it was funny because when he goes into Michael's room and he's going through a CD collection, he's like saying it's all trash, basically.
Yeah.
And he's like, never leave home without it. And he puts in a new CD. I was like, that would be funny if he started playing Primus right now. And then it just starts playing Primus. I laughed so hard. I was so weird that I just called it. But I was like, it's a 90s movie. He's going to play something weird. That would be funny if it was Primus.
Straight from the charts, right to your hearts.
Interesting that we in the game, we come to find out that him and Michael are one and the same. So through all these conversations they're having, Michael's essentially talking to himself, at least in the game world. He's like an NPC.
Well, something I've essentially pulled from the movie when I watched it recently is I think Michael just wants control in his life. Like, I think his love of horror, he gets tired of horrific things specifically happening to him. So he's got like this morbid thing where he likes watching horrific things happen to other people. He takes comfort in horror films. And, you know, a game like Brainscan, it's a chance for complete and total control, you know? And he has it for like the first level when he commits the original murder, and then it's just progressively taken away from him, and he begins to appreciate, I think by the end of the movie he grows to appreciate what control he actually did have in his life. Like, he works up the courage to talk to Kim directly and ask her out. I'm going to give a point to the movie. I love the fact that she's like, yes, I will go out with you. She's like, maybe. No, definitely. And it's more than likely she's going to, but it's not an immediate yes, you know?
Well, that was a weird conversation, because then she like kisses him on the lips before she leaves, and it's like, well, that's not a maybe.
Well, also added the fact that her revelation about how she's been watching him and taking pictures wasn't a part of the game either. That actually turned out to be true. He finds pictures of him because she's spying on him too. It was nice to see her play hard to get instead of just like super mega happy ending. You know, absolutely, I'll totally date you. I'll totally date you.
Diddly. She's played by Amy Hargreaves.
Yes.
She's from Homeland, and she plays Maggie in that. I think that's what she's most known for. And
she was also in 13 Reasons Why. She was the main character's mom.
Okay. Yeah, she's not all the actors in this are pretty good. I would essentially say they all get the job. Like, they know what their parts are and they do them very well. Even the police officer, they all just, everyone, I don't want to say they're on fire, but they know what the job is and they do it correctly.
Yeah, I mean, with a movie like this, there's a little bit of leeway because, again, the big twist at the end where it's, you know, the construct of a game. They don't have to necessarily all be 100% true to life. Like, there's definitely things that feel just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say stylistic. Maybe that is the word I'm going for, where it just kind of feels like this doesn't feel quite right. It's very dreamlike.
It is. Use of the score, which is, I think, the most important part of the movie for me, which as soon as I heard it, and I'll put a clip here so that people can hear like the main theme. That score just reminded me for some reason of Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, and it really set up a mood, and I gotta say it accomplished that mood.
It's very heavy, very prominent, and very moody, and very 90s.
Yeah, yeah,
George
that too.
George S. Clinton did a wonderful job, and the theme, it's ever looming, very very foreboding, and it plays through like a lot of the movie, different variations.
But essentially, it's bass and piano, which is what you would expect from like I said, like a Twin Peaks type of soundtrack.
Yeah,
So it's just heavy, like you said, moody, and listening to it. I even listened to it outside of the movie, and I was like, man, this is really good.
it was great. Like I saw this movie, I want to say, God, 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago at a friend's house. I was staying over with them at the time, and I caught it on demand, and I was just, I don't know, I was hooked. It was, I love, we haven't gotten too many killer video game movies. Like I think there was that one with Frankie Muniz a long time ago. I forget what it was called.
Or something. Player One, not Player One, Gamer.
Well, Ready Player One was horrifying, but I don't think that's a horror movie. But yeah, there was I don't remember much about that one outside of I think it was a video game based off of Elizabeth Bathory, and also there's a point where one of the characters is giving advice on how to beat Silent Hill 4, but they give the cheat on how to beat the boss in Silent Hill 1, which would never work.
Right. It's called Stay Alive 2006.
There we go. Thank
Yeah.
you. Like we don't see that genre often, and I love it. Like it feels very, it's very much the kind of media that I grew up with, and I love the ambition. I love the just how fucking weird it is. You don't see movies like this anymore. They're usually very much higher budgeted, and they get way too hung up on the technology. And I think this one, like, it has it just enough where you can like watch the movie and actually care more about the characters and the story than the actual like, oh wait, how does this work? How does that work? Wait, huh? Okay,
Yeah, it sets up the characters before going crazy technological, just anything. And that's where obviously where the most important components of a story come together. So it is a good thing they focused on that first. I'm trying to think, like, because it does share other tropes of the 90s and late 80s where, like, kids would be home alone. They would have a whole, like, massive room with everything in it, like big TVs, big surround sound. Like, it's really kid empowerment or teen empowerment is something that always happened in 90s movies like Blank Check, Richie Rich, Home Alone movies, like, so many to name. But it does kind of share that trope a little bit. It doesn't lean heavily into it.
I like how it twisted though, because it's like, yeah, any teenager would kill to have this kid's room. Like he
Right.
has the entire attic all to himself. It's spacious. It's bigger. It's almost as big as my apartment. But at the same time, and even the trickster even calls him out on this later. It's like, why don't you just fucking tell your dad that you don't like being left alone all the time? And why don't you ask Kimberly out? Why don't you do all these things? Why do you always just kind of wall yourself away up in the attic watching horror movies on loop? I don't know. I really like how it takes. Is like, yeah, he has all these cool gadgets, but at the end of the day, the isolation it's killing him.
Right. Truly an interesting movie. I would implore anyone to go watch it if they haven't. I'm really glad I did, and this is without me even knowing that it ever existed. I'd never seen anything of this movie. If I had, my brain had completely forgotten it. So,
I'd say if you love horror and you love video games, and especially if you love horror video games, it's worth checking out. Like, I think it's, like I said, it's really good to kind of take a dive back into when horror video games were still like really in their infancy, in terms of like, to the point, where they rose to just enough attention where they were able to grab the national stage and everyone was going on their usual witch hunt, the same one that they went for horror films and music and everything else. Like, it was the newest moral outrage of the 90s. It was just those damn video games.
right. And then next it was, oh, it's that Marilyn Manson music. It's that Korn band. It's like anything that was like, the parents aren't responsible for their children. That was the 90s. And I mean, this even goes back to the 60s and 70s too, when they thought that comic books were making kids juvenile delinquents.
Anything kids like that took them away in their eyes from the power of Christ was considered demonic. Dungeons and Dragons, music, video games, it didn't matter. Pokemon's been called demonic at one point.
Knights in Satan's Service, yeah, Pokemon, you name it. We've been through decades of parents trying to blame things on anything but themselves. Not that I'm saying every parent is bad. Obviously, some kids are just born bad. It's true. It's a fact. But, it's certainly not video games that's doing it.
But I do love how the movie kind of straddles the line a bit. Like, you would think that the whole movie would be an argument against it, but it's very much like, oh no, he ended up learning more about himself in the process. And I think it was interesting to see how the line between, the fake blood and guts of the movies or video games gets kind of blurred with the real one,
Right. Yeah, that's the whole point of the movie. So if anyone finds that interesting, I mean, that's the reason that it was made, literally just to have this, like, what are video games violent? And for the character Michael, if he survived he lived through that trauma of his mother dying, and then, like, even in the beginning, it shows him crawling on the pavement. His leg is just completely
shredded.
Messed up. Yeah, it's shredded. It's like pulpy. It asks that question of him, like, is this like mentally well for you to be into horror movies because of this reason? Like seeing other people get hurt as the way you got hurt when you were a child. And it kind of asked that question too for him. And I think in the end he finds out that it is just a game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a game.
He gains a new appreciation for horror in a different aspect. I think you're onto something. I'd like to say he kind of grows to appreciate it in a more healthier fashion, to where he's not going to use it to like isolate himself away from people anymore.
Yeah.
But he does thrash his computer. He as soon as he realizes the entire thing was all a game.
Yeah, but that's Brainscan, everyone. And I hope everyone enjoyed listening to this episode. Obviously, we've done other honest reviews on the channel. We've done Ghostbusters Afterlife. What else did we do, Chava?
Oh, God. I don't know. We've done so many reviews across like multiple different shows and channels. It's getting hard to keep track.
The Netflix Resident Evil movie, the Netflix Resident Evil. Me and Webb did the Sega Genesis sound card, which was a fun episode too. So just go check those out if you enjoyed this. There's plenty more to talk about on other movies and media. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Do you have anything else to say, Chava?
Just thank you for having me. And I hope I get to come back and talk about many more games and movies. Thank you for taking my suggestion. Because again, it was one of those movies I saw. And it's just like, it's that Stefan would fucking love this. I hope we can talk about it.
I did. It's true, and you were right, and I did, and I plan to buy the Blu-ray of it very soon. So please support Brainscan if you're interested in watching it. I know we kind of spoiled things, but it's still worth a view. And don't forget to subscribe and everything. And we'll come back with another honest review soon. I'd really like to do Dead Space because Dead Space remake is coming out soon, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, everyone have a good day.
Catch you later.